myself the moment before I'm about to start. So.
You know what? I am in the same boat, so don't worry. We're yeah, I am usually that person at a restaurant. I'm like, I'll take an extra napkin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Hi, this is Brent Feldman, your host of Mix and Matchbox. We are back today with another episode. Today we have Andy Culligan. Andy is the founder, fractional CMO of andyculligan.com. And I'd like to welcome you here to the show. How are you doing, Andy?
Doing well, Brent. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for being on. Looking forward to jumping into the questions. And I guess the first one is a relatively straightforward or easy one, but you've had sales experience from a very young age. How did this help, kind of get you into your career now?
Yeah, so I started selling. I started doing all things sales. Let's just go through some of the odd jobs I've had growing up. My dad was always very, push is the wrong word. My dad was always very encouraging of like learning, how it works and how life works, and was encouraging them from when I was an early teenage on to during summer holidays, summer vacation from school to work, right? Which was actually great. In hindsight, when I look back on it, it was I had a lot of fun, So I was doing things like merchandising, data input, all these odd jobs at offices, but the merchandising thing was interesting. That got me on the road, going around working for Nike and placing stuff in Irish stores for Nike around promotions and stuff, which was super interesting, like 14 or whatever it was, right? But then I did everything then from like selling gym memberships on the street and being paid on commission when I was in uni to selling like canteens of cutlery to the president of Ireland. That's not a joke. I actually did that. Then I lived in the States for a bit and worked at I worked at an amusement park in the States. I lived in there for the summer. And that was all sales. That was dragging people onto a thing that we were trying to sell there the entire time. So it was nonstop sales. So what did I learn from it? I think when I went to uni, I studied marketing, but it helped me understand like what the role of a seller is, right? And really understand like the craft of sales, I would say, right? And like how to approach a prospect, how to listen to a prospect, how to find where the problems lie within that prospect, and how to then counteract those problems with a solution, right? And really just trying to add value. I think that was something that I learned very early on from any sales gig that I was in. As long as you can add some value, you go a little bit extra for people. It doesn't necessarily have to be something to do with the product. Now, I have plenty of experience in this now in SaaS sales, but even early on, I'd always make sure to go the extra mile for the customer. And it always worked. It always worked so well. Like even if it meant selling or getting somebody else to sell something to that customer, I might lose out on a little bit of cash. I would still ensure a sale by recommending something else and being very helpful. So for me, it was always like be overly helpful with the customer, and it will rain. You'll reap the rewards afterwards. That was a very convoluted answer to your question, but that's basically what I learned. Always offer that extra level of value, and you're always, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, you will then get a good result.
No, I feel like that's super helpful, and definitely after talking to sales leaders and people in that sort of like discipline, I feel like that's it's a great sort of universal answer where I feel like there's it doesn't take much, but going the extra mile will always basically help, and and being there for the customer. So I think that's great. You've had experience in both sales and marketing, and they truly do go well together. They go hand in hand. So what about the sales process do you think is important to make sure doesn't get missed in marketing a product? Because like sometimes the sales process has to inform marketing, but are there any things that you feel like could get missed in that sort of translation there?
I think the problem is between sales and marketing in the entire process is most of the time they're not talking to one another, or if they are talking to one another, it's just throwing stuff over the wall. It's like, oh, the leads are shit. Excuse my French. That's a typical, and the marketing team or the sales team just don't understand. The sales team have no idea. I'm just going to keep on delivering these leads, and they're, and it's normally, in my opinion, it's normally a matter of education. So I think there's a level of education that's normally missing in these things, whereby marketers actually sit down with their sellers and help them understand exactly what they're doing. And a simple thing that normally hits home quite well with sellers to me is, especially if let's talk about SDR teams rather than account executives, but so like senior or sales development reps, that would be maybe following up with inbound leads, right? So let's say people are coming to the website, filling out forms, and then those leads are ending up in a queue. They might be ideal customer leads, right? And the SDRs are like, hey, you know what? I'm not interested in following up with this lead because it's not like somebody asking for a demo of the product, and they're not asking necessarily to be contacted. The thing is, once an SDR understands, hey, that lead is after costing the company about $500 to get, you realize that they're like, oh, really? Okay, then I should probably do something. Because I use the analogy, okay, guys, if you're not following up with these, we're basically putting $500 notes into a bin and lighting it on fire, right? Is everybody happy with that? Are you happy with that? Oh, geez, no, we can't do that. It's like, yeah, as well. And I also sell it in a way as well. So for these SDRs, and I also manage SDR teams, by the way, I don't just do the marketing because I came from the SDR world myself, in that if they're following up with inbound, it's a no-brainer, right? Because they and this is something I see all the time with SDR teams. They typically want to go after the accounts that they name, and they structure their day and say, hey, I'm going completely outbound and completely cold on this account. I said, well, this account is in your list, and somebody's after doing something from that account that when you pick up the phone, it's going to be like, hey, this is Andy calling from andyculligan.com. And it's the difference between somebody saying who from where to who. Oh, yeah, I've heard of you guys because I did XYZ interaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a given. It's not a given that this person's going to be like, shut up and take my money. You know, it's going to be like a lot of work is still involved. And that's the thing that people don't quite get. Oh, you still need to do work. Oh, okay. I get it now, right? And that needs to be like, that needs to come from the marketing side. Like the marketer needs to go and say this to the sales team, sit down with whoever is their stakeholder in this, right? Who is their customer? So typically it would be the SDR, would be the marketer's customer if they're delivering leads to them. Or if it's in a smaller organization, maybe it's gone directly to sales, right? Then you sit down and have these conversations, bring them through exactly how they're bringing leads in, what those leads are going to look like, what the expectation should be. Hey, I expect 60% of the leads to be bad and 40% of them to be good. So when I hear from sellers, all the leads are bad, I normally ask, okay, what percentage? And they're like, oh, probably like 30% of them are bad. And I'm like, brilliant. That means we're doing great. And they're like, what? And I'm like, you know, like, oh, I expect 60% of them to be bad. And sellers, I got that rapport with sellers, but most marketers don't. So marketers need to go and start building that rapport with sellers, because then they start getting into each other's pockets a little bit more and understanding each other's world a little bit better. And that's the problem. But it needs to be marketing led. If it's not marketing led, it's not going to happen, because the nature of the beast with sales is that they're going to be looking to open and close deals. That's what they're doing. Blinkers on, let's go close business. They don't have time for anything else. So marketing needs to be the initiative, needs to be driving the initiative there.
That's interesting. Yeah. Because like, I think I've heard, the push from, the other side where, the sales teams are, well, let's, push marketing to, get this going. But, I think you've got a good point in regards to like the sales team really does. They have their blinders on, and maybe in a way they should, in order to like keep focused on the task at hand. But it's really the marketing team that needs to make sure that not only understanding the sales team, but pushing them in a way too.
I agree. Fully agree.
Cool. Okay. You've done a lot of advising in the SaaS space, and for companies that have been acquired or sold, which is interesting, very cool. I have two questions associated with this, so I'll break it up. Does the marketing or sales process or strategy change in the anticipation of a sale or acquisition? So have you noticed any sort of like, like direction or culture shifts as those sort of like, processes are in flux?
Sort of is the answer to that, because it depends. If they're going through a lot of due diligence, then they're going to be looking at every single number and every single dollar that's being spent. And that might then influence how you're spending. Like, you're probably not going to be doing as much testing. But in saying that, it's unlikely for you to want to change the world when you're in when you're in a buying cycle, like, or so you're in a cycle of being bought, right? It's going to be just keep going as is. And mostly, like, unless you're on the C level, you're not going to really know that that's on the card. So you also don't want to be shuffling things up too much, because then people start getting suspicious, right? So it's unlikely that you're going to change the world before an exit happens,
Yeah.
right? Or an event.
Yeah.
Right?
Cool. Okay. And then what do you think your unique gift is when it comes to this specific segment of marketing, SaaS marketing, where your digital ecosystem is sometimes your only tool? Now, sometimes obviously you'd have an outbound sales team. Sometimes you'd have, a sales team that is all working, but obviously you've got to rely heavily on that digital ecosystem. But yeah, what do you think you kind of bring to the table for SaaS marketing specifically?
It depends, right? And that's another answer. You're like, damn it. No, it depends. So on what exactly? So it depends on SaaS. SaaS is there's two sides to SaaS. There's volume SaaS and high ticket SaaS, right? I've got experience in both. So high ticket SaaS being the different. So high ticket SaaS, just for people that are listening, high ticket SaaS would be sort of 100K a year contracts, right? And that's annual recurring revenue of 100K, or let's say 120K to keep it simple. That would be monthly recurring revenue of 10K, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if your annual recurring revenue is 120K, you divide that by 12, that gives you your monthly recurring revenue. And that's a SaaS model, but it's a high ticket SaaS model. And that's ultimately different to what you just mentioned there, which is what a lot of people think of when they say SaaS, which is high volume SaaS. And high volume SaaS is you've got hundreds of, if not thousands of customers all paying a small amount every single month. So let's say, for example, Netflix would be a volume SaaS business. Or that's a volume subscription business, but the premise of it is the same as a software as a service, right? In that they offer access to their product for whatever it is, $10.99 a month, and it costs you whatever a year. You'll have a year price and then a monthly price, right? Now, the core difference between both of those models, the volume SaaS and the high ticket SaaS, is as a marketer is customer acquisition costs, otherwise known as CAC, right? Mm-hmm. If I just say CAC here, people just laugh and think, oh, he said CAC, but they don't know what it is. So customer acquisition costs can be much higher in high ticket SaaS because the money that you're getting back, the return that you're getting back on a customer is much higher than what you're going to get from volume SaaS. Mm-hmm. So again, I'll go back to the numbers. If a company's paying me 120 grand a year, I have probably quite a bit more money to spend on bringing that customer in than I would for somebody that's paying me, for example, $10 a month. So that's $120 a year rather than 120,000, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a bit of a different game, and that's when you go to the volume SaaS play, what you just referred to there in that digital space. My playbook is quite simple. If we're spending money on ads, which that's the chief way to grow there in that space, right? Just mostly on Google, so PPC. That's where the majority of your growth is going to come from, is on PPC. When it comes to spend, when it comes to digital marketing spend, right? That's where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. But what a lot of people make the mistake on is they focus too much on the top of levels or top of funnel sign up, right? So a sign up being, most people would be familiar with the free trial concept, and in a volume SaaS model, it'd be very simple. You sign up for the product, you get 2 weeks for free. You enter your credit card details after 2 weeks, then you start paying, right? Mm-hmm. The thing with that is that people focus mostly on trying to bring as many people into that motion as possible, mm-hmm. whereas they lose sight of the ones that are actually then converting into business. Mm. So what you end up doing is you end up spending a ton of cash in getting people into that trial motion, and then maybe 60%, 70% of them won't ever buy from you. Like they're just wanted to test the tool, whatever. This is particularly bad. It's particularly, you notice it's particularly in the US market, because the US buyer or US users are much more open to technology than in Europe, right? Yeah. Which is an interesting thing, right? So I know that like my conversion rate in the US market from when people first enter the app to actually go and purchase within the app is going to be much lower. So I know that I need to bring in more top of funnel in the US, but I also want to focus on those type of contacts or those type of people that are then going to convert. So I then feed that information back into Google, and then Google then, so what we did at Lead Feeder, for example, we had We had a data warehouse, and then on top of the data warehouse, we had Segment, which was then segmenting Segment.io, which is a customer data platform. We were then segmenting out certain segments based on what we had communicated back from who was purchasing the product from our own servers back into the data warehouse, into segmenting audiences, and then pushing that back to Google to tell Google, bring in more of these type of people, right? And then what we were doing is we were cutting down as much spend as possible on campaigns that weren't turning into money. So we had a rule like, hey, if a campaign's not bringing in 3 times what we're spending on it, then cut it. So, and we knew after circa a month or so that whether or not that was actually giving us a return, right? So we had this rule of thumb where it was like LTV to CAC, which is lifetime value to CAC. Customer acquisition costs need to be a minimum of 3 to 1. If it's over 3 to 1, we need to spend more on it. If it's lower than 3 to 1, we need to see if we need to cut some spend on it. We need to try to make it more efficient. Okay. Now that's volume SaaS. That's my playbook, and I took in the reason why I mentioned high ticket SaaS is because my experience earlier on in my career before I went to Leadfeeder was all high ticket. So that entire thinking of like, let's focus on bottom of funnel rather than top of funnel, and not paying as much attention, still paying attention, but not as much attention to top of funnel than we were then bottom, is more of that high ticket SaaS thinking. Bringing in like very tailored, like running very tailored campaigns towards accounts, like a smaller subset of accounts that you know are going to probably be more likely to convert.
Yeah.
Which is not something that you typically see in high volume SaaS because they want everyone.
Yeah.
Right. So I use the thinking of high volumes or high ticket SaaS into high volume.
Awesome.
Sorry, that was a super long answer. But
that was great. That was great. Well, and I appreciate you covering both sides of it because, like, yeah, I will say that I do think of like, the SaaS that I interact with being the, okay, we have a bunch of software that we utilize as a company, and that's going to be, relatively somewhat, low dollar per month sort of transactional, sort of things. But I appreciate, especially on that side, making sure that you're segmenting the data in a way of, getting people into, and boy, we could spend a whole nother podcast on talking about the freemium model, getting people in, software trials and what that actually means. But I appreciate the push towards make sure that you look at the data, the people that are going to stick around, the people that are going to actually, be that lifetime value, as opposed to somebody who's going to, be there for the acquisition, the trial, and then potentially go away. And definitely, and the other reference on just like looking at, the bottom of the funnel traffic for those higher dollar value sales, I feel like that's super helpful too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, it seems like you're operating mainly out of Europe and are currently in Vienna, if I'm getting that right.
Yeah, I'm just outside of Vienna, but yeah, for all intents and purposes, let's say it's Vienna. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Well, also congrats on being in one of the most livable cities, or at least near it.
Yeah. So when I say I'm just outside, so I'm literally, I can drive to the city within 20 minutes, so it's not far. But yeah, Vienna is one of those places there. Yeah. It's also one, funnily enough, the most unfriendliest city in the world as well. So there you go.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, definitely good all around. Well, as a CMO, I guess and especially a fractional CMO, what's important about navigating culture differences in order to make the impact that you need for the business? Because as you might be, working with companies that are working across, sort of lines, and you're coming into, a new company, new situation, how do you navigate those kind of cultural differences?
The Irish get along with everyone. That's
simple answer there.
So it sort of is. So I'm married. I'm married to an Austrian, right? So I like, our household is a mess when it comes to languages and everything. Like we say, it's a mix of German and English, and I have a daughter, and the two of them are screaming at me in German. I'm screaming at them in English. It's a mess, right? But the sort of half joking there. But I think, look, my private life, I've got a lot of friends internationally now because of the fact that I'm an expat in a country, right, where I didn't grow up, right. So you end up meeting a lot of people. I've also, for the majority of my career, I've worked with multinationals, or companies that operate on a global level. So multinational always seems so enterprise, but a number of companies were that enterprise size company and they work on that multinational. And any company that I've worked with in SaaS has always focused on everywhere. It's never been like, let's just focus on Austria, which would make no sense because Austria's tiny.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, like, as much as I love Austria, it's not my focus of attention when it comes to winning business. I do actually have 2 customers in Austria, so great customers as well. Don't get me wrong, but when it comes to new business acquisition, I'm not focusing on it as a market. But to go back to your point around cultural differences, there's like across Europe, you've got so many different cultures anyway, right? So you get to know a couple of things, especially when working in these types of environments whereby they're fast paced and there's a lot of stress and so on. You understand how to work with people, and I don't think that it's Europe in particular. I find that at the core, everybody feels more or less, or everybody thinks more or less the same way.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about how to package things when you go and speak with somebody. So I've run teams of 10 nationalities on that team, right? And I know that you just need to talk to somebody maybe a little bit differently, but that's just how it is. And from the personal side of things, I've learned that you just need to accept that that everybody's different culturally. Like you cannot expect somebody to change because it's so ingrained within them. And that was something that really drove me nuts for the first 5 or 6 years when I was living here. I've been living here for 15 years. And for the first 5 or 6 years, I was like, why are they doing things this way here? This makes no sense. And I was pissed off at the world. And I was like, this is not good. They shouldn't do it that way. But they're not going to change. It is what it is. You just need to accept that that's just how it is. And that's how people think. And that's what's ingrained in society. And that's just how it is. It's at their core. So either you adapt to it or you leave. You know, like that was my thing. And that then translated into my business life. When I worked with people from different nationalities. So for example, when I'm dealing with an Austrian, I know, okay, maybe this is the best way to approach this particular subject with this person because of how they think based on the world that they grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
Same goes with German. Germans are a little bit different than Austrians. Everyone puts them in the same boat, but they're not. You need to treat them in a little different way. The French are a nightmare. No, I'm joking. The French are just the French, right? But there's certain ways of working together with French people. So yeah, and also there's also cultural difference when you're speaking with people from the US. So I there's certain things that I would be careful of when I'm speaking with people from the US. For example, I'm Irish and I curse a lot, which I've already cursed a couple of times. My apologies. I haven't thrown any F's in there, so you're lucky.
That's
but I know
okay.
when I'm speaking.
We're fine on that. We don't have any child restriction, like there's no kids watching this podcast. At least I don't think.
Good. Well, but that's the thing with people from the US, you need to be careful because that can really offend people from the US, right? Mm-hmm. Which is fine. Again, that's just part of it. So I'm always very careful watching my mouth a little bit there, right? But yeah, cultural differences, like I'd say I embrace it. It's interesting, right? But you need to take it with an air of caution, right? Mm-hmm. That would probably be the thing. And as I said, everybody loves the Irish, and I'm not joking about that. The Irish can commit murder and get away with it, no problem. Like my wife always says to me, "How in the name of God do you guys manage this? You can say what you want, you get away with it." I don't know how it works, but it does,
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean that is good. I do appreciate the general lessons or the notes on just trying to understand where people are coming from, understand not only them as a sort of person, but maybe their cultural background in order to better communicate with them. And I will say, as a fractional CMO, sometimes you have a tough job because you have to motivate people from maybe a lot of different places and and get people on the same page. So I mean, I feel like that's a good recommendation for not just a CMO in general, but certainly for, as what you do, integrating into not one, but multiple companies maybe. So, yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. So this is going to be completely changing topic here, but one of the topics you like to cover is GTM mastery, and it became ever more important with the sort of launch of GA4, and is really and hopefully you don't mind me kind of like putting it this way, but I think it's almost a discipline split between being a pseudo engineer and having at least a cursory understanding of the data layer and a marketer's approach to what they need from insights. What skills do you think you need coming to the table to get good at GTM, and what do you think it takes to be great? That's a heavy question. Sorry.
So no, that's fine. That's fine. When you're talking about GTM, are you referring to go-to-market or Google Tag Manager?
Google Tag Manager. And
Google
if you're talking about GTM,
I'm talking about go-to-market. But I can also cover Google Tag Manager. Absolutely fine.
I'd love that. Yeah, actually. And then actually, you know what? I may appreciate all that, your perceptions on go-to-market as well.
So go-to-market is my specialty, but so when it comes to with Google Tag Manager, I am not I'm not an expert in Google Tag Manager. I have a guy basically that does all of my tracking, but I'll get into that in terms of GA4 and what you just mentioned there. So the question was around interpreting the data and making sure that you're tracking the data correctly. So everything that I mentioned before in this high volume SaaS piece about how we looked at the funnel in a way in which we wanted it to be profitable. So we focused everything on the bottom of funnel and then made sure that we were only focusing on those companies that were more likely to convert into business. We wouldn't have been able to achieve any of that without having everything set up correctly using Google. So whether it's in Google Tag Manager, firing tags, or if it was, and then that goes hand in hand with GA, right? Back then we were using the old GA, right? Mm-hmm. And then Google decided to destroy that beautiful piece of technology and create GA4, which is an absolute shit show. Mm-hmm. But GA4 it's like I've spoken to so many marketers that were absolute experts in the previous version. Do you just call it GA3? I don't know. Google Analytics before GA4, the Google Analytics before GA4. And they still can't get their head around GA4. So I still think there's a lot of work that needs to be done by Google and also a lot of education that needs to be done on the marketer side when it comes to GA4. And I guess it's going to be very, very powerful. That's the plan. They wouldn't have gotten rid of the original GA to replace it with something that's less powerful, right? But I still think there's a lot of work that needs to be done there in enablement of marketers to bring themselves up to the next level, right? Now, I've got a relatively good grasp on Google and all of the products. So Google Tag Manager to a certain extent, but that's more so people on my team that would then go and make sure that that's functioning correctly. Mm-hmm. But then interpreting the data, I would say I've got a very high level of knowledge when it comes to using Google Analytics, previous analytics, and also somewhat in GA4 now. Other places would be Search Console. This is something that you should also be keeping an eye on as well, right? I think there's too many marketers out there that don't really understand how to use any of those tools and are a bit afraid of them, so they don't really look at them and they shy away from it. I, for a long time, didn't know anything about any of those tools and I didn't use them because of that. I was one of those marketers. And because of the role that I was in that high volume SaaS, I needed to understand it. So I just dug into it and really got a good understanding of it. And to answer your question, like what do marketers need to do to get the understanding of that data layer, they really need to get their hands dirty with those tools, and they need someone to show them what they're looking at and really interpret it, right? So
yeah, without that information, it can be extremely hard to, sort of navigate. And I think, you would also talk just previously in another question about more advanced tools about data segmentation and, what you can potentially do with it. So it's interesting. It's like, you need to have the data at your hands. You need to know what it is. You need to be able to operate the tools. But there's so much more that you can be doing with that data. And that's understanding your market, understanding your funnel, understanding what you're doing with it. So yeah, I appreciate that. And also the pivot from not being go-to-market and being Google.
That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah, but I guess continuing on, I guess there's recently been some talk about Google not moving away from third-party cookies, and so marketers have spent months and possibly years, even groaning about the cookie apocalypse. What do you think this changes about data for marketers to leverage moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, so This is such a funny thing because it was like this third-party data thing they've been talking about for years, and now they came out like last week or whatever it was and said, "Oh, we're still going to have third-party cookies on Google Chrome." It's like, oh, for Christ's sake, of course you are. You know, like it's like, okay, like just make a decision and stick to it. You know, like just stick with it. I get it, but just do something. Anyway, Google, obviously, I get it. A lot of pushback from the world, basically saying, "Hey, we need to continue with third-party cookies, otherwise advertising is going to be terrible, and we're not going to be able to target correctly, whatever." Right? And I don't think marketers. I was never really too concerned with it. Like, it is what it is. You need to play with you play in the playing field that's provided to you. You know, that's what it is. We've had the same thing in Europe with GDPR, for example. GDPR is a big deal where you need to be very careful in terms of who you're reaching out to and make sure that you're GDPR compliant when you're going out with any marketing comms, right? Now, everybody was terrified of GDPR when it first started. This is going to be the ruin of all things marketing. We're not going to be able to do email marketing. We're not going to be able to reach out to prospects. Blah. It's fine. Nothing happened. Everyone. Actually, I would argue that we've sent more comms than ever post GDPR, so much so that prospects are like, "Stop contacting me. This is enough." Or they don't even respond anymore because they're so swamped with shit people sending over to them, right? So I wouldn't when it comes to this Google third-party cookies thing, I'm less concerned. I think what marketers probably need to focus on is data that's more close to home. So first-party data. So let's have a look at first-party data. That's the data of the people, for example, that are visiting your website. So what's happening in your own front room, right? Or in your own garden, right? Pay attention to what's happening there. Most companies aren't, right? If you've got 100,000 people visiting your site on a monthly basis, it would be cool to know which companies they're coming from to visit your site. So I'm sort of plugging Lead Feeder here, even though I haven't been a CMO there in 3 years. But there are tools out there that show that, and that's first-party data. It's data that you own, but you probably don't even look at. You don't even know it exists. And that's the type of data that you should probably be doing something with, rather than this going after accounts based on third party. Like, it's here for good now anyway. Third party data, as long as it's on Google Chrome, which the majority of the planet is on Google Chrome, I guess, at this point. So it's here to stay. Fine, we'll continue ads. Fine, it's going to be same old. But I think marketers really need to pay attention to that first party data and do something with it.
Preach. Yep. I completely agree. That's awesome. All right. Speaking of, cookies and data on people, I think another topic you cover is marketing personalization. And, it's important to be reaching the right customer at the right time with the right messaging. And now with the advent of AI, we have the ability to augment this, with, maybe custom notes, offers, deals, incentives, and more. How can the convergence of AI and personalization change the way we're interacting with customers?
You're the second person to ask me this today, by the way.
Oh, man. I thought it was a darn original question, but dang it.
Yours was definitely more interesting. Your question was definitely better than the last one, I promise.
Thank you. You're just saying that. No.
Your wording was fantastic. No, I think it's still too early to tell when it comes to AI, and that's not the answer that anybody wants to hear. People want to hear, "Oh, what do I see as the vision for AI, etc." Like, I had a conversation with my brother about this morning. My brother's a CPO with a tech company as well, so you could say that SaaS runs in the family. And we were talking about. He asked me actually, "Hey, are you seeing SDRs or sellers being replaced by AI? Like, are you seeing that in any of the companies you're working with?" I was like, "No, definitely not. Like, there's no single, like, people are talking about it. Oh, people are going to be replaced by AI. When? Tell me when. Like, that's maybe years down the road. Like, I still, personally, right now, again, to go back to the thing, like, we can only play in the playing field that's provided to us, right? And I think AI right now is very helpful in saving time. I don't think AI replaces us, right? In terms of how it currently exists. It might at some point in the future be a replacement for people. Okay, then we need to figure something else out. But for up until that point, it's very much a tool that can be very helpful. For example, like, as you said, things like putting together contracts, like stuff that doesn't necessarily require too much of a human touch in it, because I still don't fully trust it. Do you trust it? Like if you're using a tool, like if you're really communicating with prospects, etc., there are tools out there, but do you really trust it?
Yeah, and to talk to your customers, like, or put, some sort of custom note in there, even though it has theoretically, maybe access to learning on all of this data in the background, if it put out the wrong message, it could be, catastrophic.
That's the thing. Like you're not gonna have so like the thing with AI is I think you need to be very careful if you're having AI as an interface between a person. Like if you're replacing a person and how that person is communicating with AI, then you're in trouble. I think I don't see that, and people will cop on to that, and people don't like that either. People want to be talking to people, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're far away from that. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but I think we still got a bit of a way to go.
Definitely. I agree that we have plenty of time. I guess, really back, to some of the SaaS things, during the process of like scaling up, investment into sales and marketing is definitely is super critical. Do you prioritize one versus the other? And, how do you, kind of coach making this sustainable? And that is tough about, how you prioritize, or can you prioritize either sales over marketing, marketing over sales? And then keeping that going.
Prioritize sales over marketing first. If you're a startup, go with sales before you go with marketing. Sellers can be their own marketers. Just make sure that they're selling. So the thing that I see quite often, especially with startups, is that they bring in heavy marketing efforts from the beginning, and they don't even really have great product market fit yet. So you should be trying to do some founder-led sales in order to start bringing in customers, paying customers, or if you're running a SaaS product, you may not even ask them for money yet. You might be just saying, "Oh, I need feedback on the product. I need to see what the best use cases are for this particular type of business. I need to understand better what my ICP is, my ideal customer." So you bring people into the platform, and then once they start to see value out of the platform, you need to then understand, if I take this away, how much would they pay to get it back? That's the thing, right? Once you get that point, that's when you've got a viable business, and from there you can continue investing in a little bit of in an additional seller would be probably my advice. That additional seller will then take on whatever work has been done by the founders and then try to bring it in, and then the next hire after that is marketing. But bring the money in the door first before you start spending it. That's my advice.
That is awesome. That's actually kind of leads right into the next, question, which was, like as a SaaS company is looking to grow, but maybe doesn't have the capital at hand, what are some brass tacks thing they can do? And I feel like that's really helpful, of like basically spend on sales. If you get the sales, then you can fund your marketing. And then after that, hopefully continue to scale and grow after that. But yeah, and I don't know what the recipe looks like, but maybe you have some, sort of like keynotes on after you get some of those things in place and get marketing in, are there anything else that they can do to continue scaling, continue growing?
Yeah, you need to have a plan. That's what the thing is that most people are missing, is a plan, right? So there's no marketing plan. There's no plan. There's no marketing plan that's aligned to company targets. What is the company target? Do you know what the company target is? How much you need to grow by? Like, especially if you're very early stage, you may not even know what the numbers look like. You're just hoping for stuff to come in the door, and you haven't given it enough thought to be like, okay, how much are we actually going to grow by? And then let's set that as our North Star, and then everybody's working towards that North Star. So how much of that, or what's our go to market motion to get to that North Star? So are we hiring SDRs? Are we having an SDR plus a sales combo plus a marketing combo? Like, what's our positioning? Who is our ICP, our ideal customer? How many of those types of companies exist? Which markets do we want to go to? What's the breakdown per market? If I'm going into the US, how many companies do I want to win in the US for next year? If I'm going to the UK, the same question, right? If I'm going international, do I want to have multi-language sites or not? All of that needs to go into a plan. And typically what happens is marketers come in and be like, okay, let's make the t-shirts for the next business run or whatever. It's like, it's not focused on business growth. And until you get that focus, then everyone's just chasing their tails, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. I appreciate that. And that is the last question I have, but I'm now curious of like how many situations you walk into where that is the case, that basically they just need a plan, or they need often.
Often. Yeah.
Yeah.
More often than you'd want to know. Seriously. So majority of companies, majority.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's a perfect opportunity for a plug. Definitely Andy Culligan.com. But are there any other things that you want to put out there, for the people to reach you or get in touch?
Sure. Yeah. You can get me on LinkedIn, Andy Culligan. I'm about to launch a new company with which basically covers all elements of the marketing mix, which is also product marketing, content marketing, digital operations, design, you name it, we have it. That's going to be launched in September. It's called purplepickle.io. Check that out when it comes out in September. And we are running a podcast on that now as well, which is, oh God, I don't know how many people in the calendar for that, but I've been knocking into my network a little bit to try to get people on for that. So keep an eye out for that. We have interesting people on, like an astronaut that was on the space station, on the International Space Station, and an adventurer that rode from New York to Galway across the Atlantic in a rowing boat by himself. So
wow,
that's coming up. So keep an eye out for that. But for now, you can get me on LinkedIn, Andy Culligan.
That sounds great. Where'd you get the name Purple Pickle? I think that's the first time I've heard that name. So yeah, good unique one.
Random. So we sat down in a room and we didn't know what we wanted to call it, and we basically came up with a list of, was it adjectives and nouns, and basically just crossed like every single word you could possibly think of in one column, in the adjective column, and then we also had every single word you could think of in the noun column. And process of elimination, it went through all the colors and whatever, big, small, large, whatever, crossed them out. We were left with purple, and then pickle was the other one on the other side of the noun. So there you go. That's it. Simple as that.
Oh, I appreciate that, and not to mention, people love alliteration, so can't beat Purple Pickle. So
yeah. There you go.
Well, cool. Well, seriously, Andy, thank you so much for being on the podcast. That was a lot of fun, and definitely thanks for sharing all these lessons.
Sure, no worries. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, this has been another episode of Mix and Matchbox. I'm your host, Brent Feldman. We will be back soon with more content. Please like and subscribe. Thanks. Cool. That's it.
Sweet.
Awesome. Good. That was awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Gonna stop.